Welcome to Storytime with Nanny. And I'll go ahead and tell you, it took me a lot longer trying to get this camera set up at this new location and everything than it did to get here. But this is my parents' new home. Um, they're almost completely moved in. And it was my dad's parents' home. So it has a lot of sentimental value. Today, let's see, today is Story Time with Nanny Day 19, and we're going to start in Silver Sails. Editor is Laurel Hicks, and it's illustrated by Mike Davis. And as I told you last time, we're going to start with Jesus feeds 5,000 people. Jesus and his disciples wanted to be alone. They wanted to talk together and rest for a while. You ever been like that, where you just want to be with your closest friends and just relax and rest and talk? So they got into a boat and sailed across the Sea of Galilee to a quiet place. But the people loved Jesus. They wanted to be near him too. When they saw him leaving, they followed after him, so that a great crowd of men and women and little children came to the place where he went. Jesus did not send the people away. He was very kind to them. He taught them many things about God and about heaven, and he healed many persons who were sick. When it began to get dark, the disciples came to Jesus. "Send the people away," they said, "that they may go into the country round about and into the villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat." Jesus did not want to send the people away. They had come to him for help, and he wanted to help them. "Give ye them to eat," he said to the disciples. The disciples were amazed. How could they feed so many people? It seemed impossible. "How many loaves have you?" said Jesus. "Go and see." Andrew, one of the disciples, said, "There is a lad here, which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. But what are they among so many?" 5 little buns and 2 small fishes? How could that ever feed 5,000 people? That's a whole bunch of people, isn't it? What could Jesus do with one small lunch from one small boy? Everyone watched to see what would happen. Jesus told the disciples to make all the people sit down in rows on the green grass. Taking the loaves of bread and the fish in his hand, he looked up to the sky and thanked God for them. Then Jesus broke the bread and the fish in pieces and gave the pieces to the disciples. The disciples went out and gave the food to the people. As the disciples obeyed Jesus, a wonderful thing began to happen. As soon as they gave a piece of food to a person, another piece came. And so the pieces of bread and fish kept coming, until all the men, women, and little children who were gathered together there had as much as they wanted to eat. After everyone had had a good lunch, Jesus said to the disciples, "Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost." The disciples picked up enough leftovers from the little lunch to fill 12 large baskets. It was Jesus who made the bread and fish keep on coming until all the people had had enough. This was a miracle, something that only God can do. Jesus could do miracles, for Jesus is God. Jesus could give food to the hungry people, but he can do something better than that. He can feed our hungry hearts. He can make us happy and help us to do the things that he wants us to do. He can be the bread of life to us if we only trust him. So Jesus, being the Son of God, is able to, he performed many miracles, didn't he? Now, this next story is called The Quarrel, which means like fighting. The Quarrel of the Quails. And quails is a type of bird. Once upon a time, many quails lived together in a forest. The wisest of them all was their leader. The man lived near the forest and earned his living by catching quails and selling them. Day after day he listened to the note of the leader calling the quails. By and by this man, the fowler, was able to call the quails together. So a fowler is someone that works with birds. Hearing the note, the quails thought it was their leader who called. When they were crowded together, the fowler threw his net over them, and off he went into the town, where he soon sold all the quails that he had caught. The wise leader saw the plan of the fowler for catching the quails. He called the birds to him and said, "This fowler is carrying away so many of us, we must put a stop to it. I have thought of a plan. It is this: the next time the fowler throws a net over you, each of you must put your head through one of the little holes in the net. Then all of you together must fly away to the nearest thorn bush and free yourselves." The quail said that this was a very good plan, and that they would try it the next time the fowler threw the net over them. The very next day the fowler came and called them together. Then he threw the net over them. The quails lifted the net and flew away with it to the nearest thorn bush, where they left it. They flew back to their leader to tell him how well his plan had worked. The fowler was busy until evening getting his net off the thorns, and he went home empty-handed. The next day the same thing happened, and the next. His wife was angry because he did not bring home any money, but the fowler said, "The fact is, those quails are working together now. The moment my net is over them, off they fly with it, leaving it on a thorn bush. As soon as the quails begin to quarrel, I shall be able to catch them." Not long after this, one of the quails, in alighting on their feeding ground, stepped by accident on another's head. "Who stepped on my head?" angrily cried the second. "I did, but I didn't mean to." "Don't be angry," said the first quail, but the second quail was angry and said mean things. Soon all the quails had taken sides in this quarrel. When the fowler came that day, he flung his net over them, and this time, instead of flying off with it, one said, "Now, you lift the net." The other side said, "You lift it yourself." "You try to make us lift it all," said the quails on one side. "No, we don't," said the others. "You begin and we will help." But neither side began. So the quails quarreled, and while they were quarreling, the fowler caught them all in his net. He took them to town and sold them for a good price. They let a little argument get in their way, didn't they? And they fought, and they chose to keep fighting over some little silly something instead of working together. So instead of getting free, they got sold. That's not a very good ending, is it? So maybe we can learn a lesson from them. This next story is called Christopher Columbus. Hear a wonderful story. It is about a boy who lived long ago in a distant land. He grew up and became a great man. His name is known all over the world. It is Christopher Columbus. His father was a poor man who lived with his wife and children in a beautiful city beside the sea. Christopher was the oldest of 4 children. He had 1 sister. His 2 brothers were his best friends. In time of need, they gave him help and comfort. That was as it should be with brothers. Little Christopher went to school and had lessons in reading, writing, grammar, and arithmetic. He also learned to draw. He studied geography as it was taught in those days, but he never saw a globe such as in your schoolroom. Neither he nor his teacher knew that the earth is round. They thought it was flat like a floor. West of his home was the sea. He was told that west of that was another great body of water. This was called the Sea of Darkness. No one had ever crossed it. No one knew that beyond it lay our great land, America. Men feared to sail out far on the Sea of Darkness. They thought they would come to strange monsters and boiling waves. And if we sail farther still, they said, we shall come to the edge of the world and fall off. So their ships never sailed far west. Instead, they kept near land and went east. There they found countries rich in spices, silks, and gold. Little Christopher read travelers' tales about those distant lands. He listened to sailors' stories. Sometimes he went on board a ship ready to sail. "Someday I will go to the sea," he said. "Wherever other men sail, there I will go." So Christopher went to a school where he studied many things which sailors need to know. He learned about sea roads and how to tell the way by the stars. He learned many things from books and from people. But all these would have done him little good had he not learned more for himself. He learned to be brave and patient and to carry out great plans with only a little money. This did not come all at once, you may be sure. It came little by little, day by day, year by year. School days did not last long for Christopher. He became a sailor at 14. For many years he sailed on the sea. He was in one sea battle which lasted all day long. At night, both ships caught fire. The sailors jumped from the flames into the sea, and many were drowned. But Columbus grabbed an oar, sometimes swimming, sometimes floating. He reached the distant land. In later years, he felt that God had saved him for a great purpose. Years passed, and Columbus became a man. He lived in a country beside the sea. There he married the daughter of a sea captain. To support his wife and his little son, he made maps and charts. He liked to talk about the lands and people he had seen. He read travelers' tales and studied sailor maps. He learned that some wise men believed the earth was round. They said if a ship sails straight on, west or east, it will come back to the place from which it started. But these men never went to find out if this was true. So many people kept on saying, the earth is flat. It is flat like a floor. Columbus thought much about the subject. At last he said, I do not think that the earth is flat. I am sure that it is round, like an orange. If it is, I can sail around it. I would like to do that. People laughed. The earth is not round. They said it is flat. Did not our fathers say so, and their fathers before them? Who are you to call yourself wiser than they? I am sure it is, said Christopher Columbus. If I can get ships and men, I will go to prove it. But to get ships and men, he must have money. He was only a poor sailor. What could he do? He went to the king and told his plan. He said, I am sure we can sail west and find a near road to the east. We can fill our ships with silks and spices. We can find lands of gold and gems. We can teach people about the one true God. The king did a very unjust thing. He borrowed the charts and maps of Columbus, and with them he sent out a ship of his own. But a storm came up. The sailors were afraid of the great wild sea, and they came back. Columbus was very angry. He would have no more to do with the unjust king. Now that your mother is dead, said he to his little son, we will leave this land. Somewhere someone will be found to help carry out my plan. He begged his way from city to city, from country to country. He often was sad and weary, but he never lost hope and faith, nor was he too busy with his own plans to think of other people. He went to see his father, who was getting older now, and cared and comforted him. He talked over his plans with his brothers, and they did all they could to help. One of them went to England to ask aid. That means to ask for help. Christopher Columbus himself started with his little son to Spain. Here some kind people gave him money and wrote a letter to the king and queen. Perhaps they could help him. But the king and queen of Spain were busy with the war. They had no time to listen to a poor sailor's plan. I must wait, Columbus said. Years passed. He made maps and charts for a living. Sometimes he followed the king to battle in the wild mountains. He talked to people about the plan, which was a part of his life. He is a dreamer, some said. Even the little children touched their foreheads as he passed. He is a madman, they said. He wasn't, though, was he? At last, Columbus had a chance to talk to the king and queen about his plan. It is a strange thing you want to do, said they. We do not know what to think of it. We will hear what our wise men say. They called together the most learned men of the land. The poor sailor explained his plan. Few listened. Those few laughed him to scorn. Your words are silly and wicked, they said. We cannot advise the king to waste ships and men on your plan. So the king went off to fight and left Columbus again to wait. Thus passed year after year. Columbus's gray hair became white. He was growing old. 17 years had gone in the effort to get aid, and still no help came. Finally, the King and Queen of Spain said that they would help. The Queen even sold her jewels to get money for the trip. Columbus was full of joy at his success, eager to sail westward. But now a new trouble came. Sailors feared the unknown waters of the Sea of Darkness. Where would he find men to sail with him? The Pinzon brothers joined him. They had 2 little ships called the Pinta and Nina. Columbus at last got a 3rd ship, the Santa Maria. On a summer day in 1492, the 3 little ships sailed from Spain. People on shore were sobbing and crying. "Why will you go to danger and to death?" they cried to their friends on board. The hearts of the sailors failed them. They were leaving behind friends, family, and life itself. Before them was the danger and the terror of unknown seas. They cried aloud like children. Columbus tried to comfort them. He told them of lands of gold and gems far to the west. On they sailed, and east wind pushed them forward. For days and days they saw nothing but sea and sky. The sailors began to complain. "We do not believe your foolish tale that the earth is round," they said. "This east wind is taking us away from home. How can we ever sail back against it?" Then the wind sank, and there came a calm. "Must we lie here on this still hot sea and die?" they asked. One day 2 or 3 sailors stood talking on the deck of Columbus's ship. Man after man joined them. "We have followed him on this unknown sea," said one. "Shall we go on and on until it is too late to turn back? Shall we follow him and die, or shall we think of our own safety and go home?" "Who is this Columbus that we should obey him?" asked another. "He is a stranger without friends in Spain." The wise men laughed at his plan. "If we go back, people will say that we did well. Let us tell him we will go home." "Yes," said a third man, "and if he will not go back, let us throw him in the sea. We can say he was watching the stars and fell overboard." Columbus was wise and brave. To the men that were frightened, he said, "Be of good cheer, my friends. You are as safe today as when we set sail. Look at the seaweed, the birds, the driftwood, all signs of land. Soon we shall reach the land we seek and go safely home. Sail on." And sure enough, there soon rose a cry of "Land! Land!" To the west there seemed to be a far-off shore, but when morning came they saw that it was only a cloud. At last the men said, "We will not go on." "I will not turn back," said Columbus. "I sailed on this western sea to find land. With the help of God, I will go on till I succeed." On they sailed, always looking for land. One night Columbus saw far to the west a light which rose and fell. It looked like a torch in the hand of a man moving back and forth. "Did I indeed see it?" Columbus asked himself, "or do I just imagine it?" He called a sailor. "Look, there to the west. Do you see a light?" "Yes," said the sailor, "I see it. A light, a light. Land is near." Few eyes were closed that night. Early in the morning they did indeed see land. The sailors were full of eager questions. "Is it some country we have seen before? Is it an unknown land? Shall we find silks and spices, gold and gems? Or is it a land of dangers and strange monsters?" The sun rose. In the light of the October morning, the men could see a beautiful island. Its coasts were green with groves and forests. People ran about the shore, meaning the Indians were there. Columbus had come to the end of his voyage. He had sailed west and found land, but it was not the eastern country he had expected to reach. He had not found spices and gold and gems. He had found something better than gold. He had sailed west and found a new world. He had discovered America. Aren't you glad he did? And I think about how he was the brave one out of all the people on the earth, and including all the people that were always going to sea and had ships, but none of them dared go into the unknown ocean, did they, and sell their ships there, and Columbus did, and he found America. Now, This next story is called The Fisherman and His Wife. Once upon a time, a fisherman and his wife lived in a little old hut close by the sea. Every day the fisherman went fishing in his boat. One day while he was out fishing, the fisherman felt a great tug on his line. Whatever was on his line dragged the boat out into the deep water. The fisherman pulled with all his might. At last he was able to bring the gigantic fish that was on his hook. The fisherman's amazement, the fish spoke. "Please let me go," it said. "I am not a real fish, you know. I am a prince." Well, so of course this story isn't true. It's just a fun one. "Oh," said the fisherman, very much surprised. "Swim away, fish, swim away fast. I do not want to have anything to do with a fish that can talk." He put the huge fish back into the water, and it swam down toward the bottom of the sea and vanished. When the fisherman went home to his wife in the little hut, he told her about the fish that could talk. "Did you not ask him for anything?" asked the wife. "No, indeed," said the fisherman. "What should I have asked for?" "It would be fine," said the wife, "if we had a dainty little cottage instead of this dingy hut. Do go back and ask the fish to give us a dainty little cottage." The fisherman did not like to go, but he went back to the seashore. When he came to the water, it appeared all yellow and green. He stood at the water's edge and looking down said, "O man of the sea, come listen to me. My wife, Isabel, will have her own will, and has sent me to beg of thee." The fish came swimming to him and asked, "What does she want?" "A cottage," said the fisherman. "She says she is tired of living in a little hut." "You can go home," said the fish. "She is in the cottage already." So the fisherman went home, and there was his wife at the door of a dainty little cottage. Come in," she said. "Is not this better than the hut?" There was a pretty living room, a bedroom, and a kitchen, and there was a little garden behind the cottage. In the garden grew cucumbers, peas, and all kinds of vegetables. "Oh, wife, how happy we shall be," said the fisherman. Everything went happily for a week or two, and then the wife became discontented again. "Husband, I am tired of this cottage." She said, "Ask the fish to give us an elegant castle." I don't like to ask him," said the fisherman doubtfully. "It may make him very angry." "Oh no," said the wife. "You will find that he will do it very willingly." So the fisherman went to the sea. The water was blue and gloomy, but he went close to the edge and said, "O man of the sea, come listen to me. My wife Isabel will have her own will, and has sent me to beg of thee." "What does she want now?" asked the fish. "Well," said the fisherman, "she is tired of the cottage. She wants an elegant castle." "Go home," said the fish. "You will find her standing at the gate of an elegant castle." Away went the fisherman, and there was his wife standing at the gate of an elegant castle. "See, husband," she said, "is not this much better than the little cottage?" They went into the castle, and there were servants and many rooms, with expensive golden chairs and tables. Behind the castle was a garden, and around it was a beautiful park. "Now we shall be happy," said the fisherman. Early the next morning, when the fisherman awoke, his wife said, "Husband, go to the fish and tell him to make me king of all the land." "Wife, wife," said the fisherman, "you cannot be king. The fish cannot make you king." "Yes, he can," said the wife. "Go and ask him." So very sadly the fisherman returned to the sea. The water was dark and gray, and the waves were white with foam. He stood at the edge of the water and cried, "O man of the sea, come listen to me. My wife Isabel will have her own will, and has sent me to beg of thee." "Well," said the fish, "what now?" "Alas," said the fisherman, "my wife wants to be king." "Go home," said the fish, "she is king already." So the fisherman went home, and there was his wife sitting on a throne of gold and silver. "Well, wife," said the fisherman, "are you king?" "Yes," said she, "I am king." "What a fine thing it is to be king," said the fisherman. "You will never have anything more to wish for as long as you live." "I don't know about that," said the wife. The next day Isabel had grown tired of being king, so she said to the fisherman, "Husband, go to the fish and tell him to make me ruler of the sun and moon." "Wife, wife," said the fisherman, "the fish cannot make you ruler of the sun and the moon." The Isabel grew very angry, and at last the fisherman went. When he came to the sea, the wind was blowing, the waves were raging, and the fisherman grew afraid. Nevertheless, he went down to the water's edge and said, O man of the sea, come listen to me. My wife Isabel will have her own will, and has sent me to beg of thee. What is it now? Asked the fish. My wife wants to be ruler of the sun and the moon, said the fisherman. Go home, said the fish, to your little old hut again, and there they lived happily. Now, of course, that was just a made-up fun story, but what did they end up learning? I think they finally figured out that they were, all the things that they got, even the big castle and the servants and all the fancy things, it didn't make them happy, did it? They could be just as happy or happier and more content living in their little hut. Now this is a cute story. I'd actually forgotten. It was one of my kids when they were little, but I was so glad I found it. It's the story of Wiley. This is a story about a dog, a slim, silky-haired, sharp-eared little dog, the prettiest thing you can imagine. Her name was Wiley, and she lived in Scotland, far up on the hills. She helped her owners take care of his sheep. You can't think how clever she was. She watched over the sheep and the little lambs like a soldier and never let anything hurt them. She drove them out to pasture, and when it was time, brought them safely home when it was time for that too. When the silly sheep got frightened and ran this way and that, hurting themselves and getting lost, Wiley knew exactly what to do. Round on one side she would run, barking and scolding, driving them back. Then round on the other, barking and scolding and driving them back, till they were all bunched together in front of the right gate. Then she drove them through as neatly as any person. She loved her work and was a wonderful, fine sheepdog. At last, her owner grew too old to stay alone on the hills, so he had to give Wiley to two kind young men who lived in the nearest town. He knew they would be good to her. They grew very fond of her because she was so gentle and handsome and well behaved. So now Wiley lived in the city where there was no sheep farms. There were only streets and houses, and she did not have to do any work at all. She was just a pet dog. She seemed very happy, and she was always good. But after a while, the family noticed something odd, something very strange indeed about their pet. Every single Tuesday night, about 9 o'clock, Wiley disappeared. They looked for her and would call, but she was nowhere around. And she would be gone all night, but every Wednesday morning, there she was at the door waiting to be let in. Her silky coat was all sweaty and muddy, and her feet heavy with weariness, but her bright eyes looked up at her owners as if she were trying to explain where she had been. Week after week the same thing happened. Nobody could imagine where Wiley went every Tuesday night. They tried to follow her to find out, but she always slipped away. They tried to shut her in, but she always found a way out. It grew to be a real mystery. Where in the world did Wiley go? You never would guess, so I'm going to tell you. In the city near the town where the kind young men lived was a big market. Every sort of thing was sold there, even live cows and sheep and hens. On Tuesday nights, the farmers used to come down from the hills with their sheep to sell. They drove them through the city streets into the pens, ready to sell on Wednesday morning. The sheep weren't used to the city noises and sights. They always grew afraid and wild and gave the farmers and the sheepdogs a great deal of trouble. They broke away and ran about getting in everybody's way. But just as the trouble was at its worst, about sunrise, the farmer would see a little silky, sharp-eared dog come trotting all along down the road into the midst of them, and then in and out the little dog ran like the wind, round and about, always in the right place, driving, coaxing, pushing, making the sheep mind like a good school teacher, and never frightening them till they were all safely in. All the other dogs together could not do as much as the little strange dog. She was a perfect wonder, and no one knew whose dog she was or where she came from. The farmers began to watch her every week, and they called her the Wee Fell Yeen, which in Scottish means the little Tara. They used to say when they saw her coming, There's the wee foal yin. Now we'll get them in. Every farmer would have liked to keep her, but she did not let anyone catch her. As soon as her work was done, she was off and away like a fairy dog. No one knew where. Week after week this happened, and nobody knew who the little strange dog belonged to. But one day Wiley went to walk with her two owners, and they happened to meet some sheep farmers. The sheep farmers stopped short and stared at Wiley, and when they cried out, "Why, there's the dog. That's the wee foal yin." And so it was. The little strange dog who helped with the sheep was Wiley. Her owners, of course, didn't know what the farmers meant till they were told all about what I've been telling you. But when they heard about the pretty strange dog who came to market all alone, they knew at last where Wiley went every Tuesday night, and they loved her better than ever. Wasn't it wise of the little dog to go and work for other people when her own work was done? I guess she knew that the best people and the best dogs always work hard at something. Anyway, she did the same thing as long as she lived, and she was always just as gentle and silky-haired and loving as at first. I think I really enjoyed that story, and I enjoyed how she did enjoy working, and then she did get to take, I guess, a very long vacation, didn't she? She got some time off work, and she enjoyed it after a while. And, wow, sorry about that. That's really long. There we go. Anyway, but after she took a nice long vacation, it was time to get back to work, she thought, didn't she? And she enjoyed her work. And I hope you enjoyed Storytime with Nanny. And I hope to see you next time. And you have a great, blessed, safe, wonderful, happy day.